Hello, gentlemen, freaking. Let's go into this. A 0-1 victory as I was black within 19 moves. The tactical theme in this video is the invisible Greek sacrifice skip and dark square domination. So I'm playing black, my opponent's playing white, and let's get started. Immediately before we get started, I'm gonna run a move by move analysis on why what's it called? Why I play what move I play, why, the what behind it and the why behind it. Because the most important thing you can do to get better at chess is understand two important interrogatives: what and why. What and why. Why is this? So you can actually learn the information, and you can actually understand why this information is effective that you're learning during this game. Immediately, my opponent, as you see, plays the King's Pawn opening. I immediately play the Sicilian defense, c5. My whole point is to control this d4 square, and the objective is playing, saying, hey, white, you're going to play for dominance of light squares, I'm going to play dominance of dark squares. Okay, my opponent goes freaking, what's it called, knight to f6, knight to f3, I immediately go knight to c6. Why? Simply what is this? Developing a minor piece and what? Controlling dark squares. And I'm counterintuitively challenging white's dominance of the dark squares. Let's continue. My opponent immediately plays d4. Why? To try to remove this pawn that has dominance of the dark squares. I have one defender, he has two attackers. So, but also in Sicilian human theory, you're always supposed to take this pawn. Why? Because number one, you get to stop this knight from developing. Number two, you get to either force a trade with this, and you have the appropriate response if you know theory. So, my opponent takes his knight. I immediately develop knight to f6. Why? I'm willing to sacrifice a knight and move this pawn over here to get a better scope of the light. Scope of the light squares here, and potentially try to challenge this light square bishop, so I can either put all my pawns on opposite squares. Like, let's say if I'm able to get a trade off with this bishop, I'm gonna put everything on light squares. So this bishop is opposite colored and can do nothing to it. But let's continue though. My opponent goes to call knight to c3, simply trying to take more light squares and continue to remain the tension with the minor pieces, which was a pretty solid move by him. I'm surprised he knew that, and I was impressed. Let's see. E4, and then I immediately go e5. Why? It's one defender. What's it called? One defender, forcing move by knight, telling the knight to either move here or to back away and play more of the opening human theory here. My opponent actually has his third option, if you don't notice, is taking, which I decide to take like this. The top engine move in this current position is this. However, I capture like this. Why? Is to simply gain control of the light squares and always keep a mindful eye on this diagonal. So I'm not playing for the immediate. My pawn structure may be a little damaged. However, this pawn has control of these important dark squares. These pawns have control of these light squares. That makes the harder time of the bishop to get into the game than the queen that's on a light square. Understand? Let's continue. My opponent immediately plays bishop to g5, simply trying to pin my knight to the king, my relative pin, knight to queen. So I respond. Honestly, I ignored the threat for now. Why? Because I'm willing to simply say, if you want to damage my pawn structure, I'm going to take your dark square bishop and dominate these dark squares with these pawns, with this dark square bishop, with this dark square queen, and I'm going to take it. So I'm willing to sacrifice my other minor piece, have a damaged pawn structure, and control all the dark squares with an opposite color bishop. That's why I ignore the threat. So, as you see, I put rook to b8, rook to b8. My opponent plays b3. I immediately go bishop to a3. I make a mistake here. I meant to put my bishop here. I meant to absolutely pin. However, I overshot it, and I even have a tactic if my opponent doesn't notice, and I'm going to try to fork this. So I may honestly absolutely mouth slip and overstep. I don't panic, and my opponent trades accordingly. However, I trade back with the queen and not damage my pawn structure. Why? Because I realize, okay, I already have one isolated pawn. Let me follow the rule that what's it called? Francis Ande Fyodor said, pawns of the soul chest. I'm not trying to damage my pawns anymore further. So I think in the moment, okay, let me capture the queen, matter of fact. Why? Because it's down now. She's put on a dark square. And the bishop is traded off. The dark square bishop is traded off. So what is my queen going to do? Absolute hell on these dark squares. So immediately my opponent goes bishop to c4. I immediately even go for, what's it called? For a fork. I say, okay, you're going to give me the chance to fork the knight and the freaking rook. My opponent moves there. He simply makes a major mistake. Why? He panics. He doesn't realize that the queen's defending the rook, and he can remove a major what's it called? Defending the major piece on freaking for me a1, and he just gives me a free knight with a tempo and check. So, what is the move? I take a hanging piece. What is it doing? Putting the king in check. Why am I putting the king in check? So I have a turn to potentially save my bishop or continuously advance the attack. Bishop takes e3 check. My opponent goes king to d1. Also, the why is he loses the right to castle. Notice this. I play bishop to d4. Why? Simply taking domination of the dark squares even further. Protecting this isolated pawn. This pawn is my anchor. This pawn has a watch for this light square bishop. The queen has putting an absolute pin on this pawn because the king is forced to move, and I'm threatening mate in one. So in this one move, I did 5 different whys and whats. This is how you play at the highest level. So my opponent immediately tells me, okay, you're gonna damage your dark square structure even more. Okay, sure. So I simply castle. I could have played more aggressively and played more brute efficiency and trade off pawns right here. Removed one of these important, this pawn chain, I undermined it. However, I didn't feel that was appropriate. And forced the bishop to potentially move. I could have trapped the bishop even too. If I didn't like this, he would only have 1 square to go and force into a completely defensive position. But let's continue. My opponent immediately goes queen to d2. I immediately go, what's it called, d6. Why? Just simply saying, okay, I don't need to make the most aggressive move. Let me just slow down, let me take all the squares away geometrically, and continue to put pressure on this pawn, and watch where this bishop is too. This bishop is going to be the winning point of the game. So my opponent plays d6. I immediately retreat my bishop just to hear why to complete more control of the dark squares. My opponent plays rook to d1. I immediately play rook to d8, simply protecting the pawn, keeping the defender, and also still I have a long-term idea. My opponent plays b4, trying to expand on the freaking queen side, and I immediately go for the invisible Greek sacrifice. Okay, look at this. I'm gonna show you a couple lines that this is not just a concept, but this is a 2,000 level plus concept. It's called the invisible Greek sacrifice. It's saying, hey, my opponent either take, or you're gonna get invaded like this. So if my opponent takes here, I'm still gonna take here, right? I'm gonna check, fork, and gain a rook and gain a major piece. The bishop's gonna block and end up in a situation like this. And I'm gonna simply just use geometry. And even if I want to, and literally gain a position like this. That's what it would have done if my opponent decided to take. And these double isolated pawns in the corner, yeah, not gonna work out for you. And this dark square bishop too. I'm not able to put my opponent in checkmate yet because the freaking queen's there. However, the stance remains the same. That I would have absolutely annihilated his position if he took the gift. So let's go back and play a different line. I immediately go h3. My opponent immediately goes h4. Why am I going to go on? Now I simply just take here regardless. But because it's saying, hey, you can't take me. Why? Because your king is in check and still cannot take me. So let us play the theoretical line that as my opponent resigned this move, right? My king would have to move here. I would take here. Rook is undefended. Rook would go down and try to save itself. I would immediately take with the bishop and not the queen. Why? Notice where this bishop is. If that bishop wasn't there, right? Continue to liquidate the position. And I will just continue. Just simply use geometry against the king. And that's checkmate. Because this bishop's whole point was protecting this dark square. So, what can we learn from this? What was this line? What was this absolutely disgusting move? Bishop to h3? It was the point of saying, hey, math is against you now. You could either take me, and I go like this, and absolutely destroy your pawn structure, like this, and go like this, or you cannot take me, like he did, and that same exact process happens, just in a different format. Right, check, here, check, here. Freaking, oh wait, nah, that's my mistake. I messed up right here. Right, check. Freaking here. Now, of course, obviously, let's see. And then the game would go on from 1, 2, 3, pawn, 4 pawns against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. A rook and a bishop. Again, end this isolated pawn. Let's say if we switched it up and the king, let's say as the bishop blocks, I check. And let's say I go back, right? And bishop takes, queen takes e4 check, and the bishop blocks, and I check. Why? This is even better for me. The king has to go here, and then it's just mate and 1. So what does this prove? The invisible Greek safe sacrifice. We're gonna break this down more in detail. I have my notes on it, and let's go to it. It's called strategical clinician. The logic of the wedge. I showed the ultimate demonstration of engine data profile. I didn't just win, I identified a structural failure, and I applied a solution that most 2200s would never see. The B2, B3 prerogative. Most people ignore the rook to B8. I used it to force a permanent weakness on the A3 and C3 squares, which my bishop will occupy for the rest of the game. At move 17, bishop b3 looks like a blunder to a novice, but to a master it looks like a forced response. And white takes the G files, freaking H files is gonna get it open, skewer the freaking king and rook. And if white takes, it just opens itself to mate. And if white ignores, then f3 fails. Also by move 19, I removed every single defender of the king. Every single as you see. Whoa! Let's go back to move 19. And let's go move back to move 18. As I do the final move in this game, I'm removing the entire main defender of this position, this pawn, and putting too much pressure on it and overloading this piece. I could have been check. Go over again. That's how efficient that was. Because this bishop's whole goal was to simply sim here and watch these dark square diagonals and eventually get checkmate. Did I know how I was going to checkmate? No. I just simply saw, okay, I have dark square bishop, he has light square bishop, and he has absolutely nothing on the dark square, so I'm going to find a way to checkmate him on the dark squares. Understand? Hope you guys learned something new, and bye.